We are now less than 3 weeks away from opening day of 2024 for the Baltimore Orioles. So that seems like a good enough time to try once again for the third time this offseason to predict the Orioles opening day roster. That's coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Friday, March 8th, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb, and coming up on today's episode, I'm going to try for the third time, 3.0, this offseason of predicting the Orioles 2024 opening day roster, the 13 hitters, the 13 pitchers that I think they'll take north from Sarasota up to Baltimore for that opening day game on March 28th against the Angels. We'll talk through who gets those final couple of hitter spots. Can Jackson Holliday make the team? The Kjerstad, Cowser, and Stowers conversation. Who can prevail in the outfield? Plus, in the bullpen, there's maybe 4 spots available and a lot of names fighting for them, which guys I think will make the final cut. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers can join today, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. So let's jump into it. Opening day roster prediction 3.0. This will not be my last one of the offseason. Again, we still got just under 3 weeks remaining until opening day, and things are going to continue to change in Sarasota in terms of who is making this team. And to be honest with you, I'll tell you right now, before we get started, this prediction is different than my 2.0 prediction that I did back in January because a lot has changed since then. This is really my first prediction since we learned of the pitching injuries for the Orioles, which is kind of the first big thing here. So let's start with the hitters. Now, to take a look at the roster, you get 26 guys on your opening day roster, and you cannot have more than 13 pitchers. Now, some teams will choose to go with 14 hitters and 12 pitchers, but I think because of the losses of John Means and Kyle Bradish for the Orioles, who neither of them we know will be ready for opening day, and we're not sure how much longer it will be for both of them, but they won't have either of those guys. I figure the O's are not going to go a pitcher short, even though they do have enough off days to go the first 2 weeks with only 4 starters. I still feel like they're going to go with the full 13 pitchers. So we'll start there. 13 hitters and 13 pitchers, what I am projecting for the Orioles. And let's start with the hitters because I think there are bigger questions, but less questions in general for the hitters. Again, 13 slots. And I think right now, barring any trades, and again, this prediction does not predict any trades to happen, does not predict any injuries to happen. It's just about, okay, if we sped this up 3 weeks from now, and this is what the group looked like, the healthy group looked like in spring, who would be the 26 players? I think there are 11 locks for the 13 position player spots right now. I think the catchers, first of all, they are locked in. It's Adley Rutschman as your starter. It's James McCann as your backup. That is just how it's going to be as long as those two stay healthy. There is a competition for the third catcher, and the third catcher is an interesting role. Now, it's not a role in the big league team, but it's the catcher who's going to start the year in Norfolk, who, if anything happens to McCann or Adley, you would immediately call up for depth. I think right now the front runner is Michael Perez, who's been in the big leagues with the Pirates and the Mets and others over the past few years. He's been catching enough in spring where it feels like he's their number 3 guy, kind of replacing Anthony Bemboom for the O's, but again, not on the roster. 2 catchers, Rutschman and McCann. Then in the infield, I think there are 6 locks at this point. It's been kind of the same 6 locks all offseason. You've got Ryan Mountcastle and Ryan O'Hearn kind of platooning at first base /DH. O'Hearn will play a little bit of outfield, lefty-righty. Those two combine well on this team. Obviously, Gunnar Henderson, your reigning rookie of the year. Obviously, Jordan Westberg. We're not quite sure what the role will be, but he's going to be on this team. And then your 2 utility guys who you could see moved around in Ramon Arias or Jorge Mateo. And Mateo learning to play the outfield better and better is going to make his case even stronger to make this team. And while I do think there is a chance that someone like Ramon Arias could be traded before opening day to potentially get the Orioles some bullpen help, I'm not predicting trades right now. So I think Arias and Mateo both locks as well in the infield. But there are certainly, I think, 6 guys in the mix along with the 6 locks. I mean, you got Jackson Holliday, You got Nick Maton and Colton Wong, the veterans who have come in. You've got Tyler Nevin, who the Orioles brought back. And you got Kobe Mayo and Connor Norby as a couple of prospects in big league camp who are in that mix as well. And then in the outfield, there are the three obvious locks out there. It's Austin Hayes, Cedric Mullins, and Anthony Santander. All three of those guys are going to be on the team. That makes 9 locks. And I think there are 4 other outfielders currently in the mix: Heston Kjerstad, Colton Cowser, Kyle Stowers, and Ryan McKenna for one of these opening day spots. So again, those locks are Rutschman McCann, Mountcastle O'Hearn, Henderson Arias, Westberg Mateo, Hayes, Mullins, and Santander. That is 11 of your 13 hitter spots. So it leaves you 2 open spots on the roster, and most teams go with 6 infielders and 5 outfielders. So right now I have 6 infielders and 3 outfielders. That could mean 2 outfield spots. But remember, the Orioles also are working out Jorge Mateo in the outfield, which gives them a little more flexibility to carry a 7th infielder if they would like. So let's kind of go through these guys and knock some of them off the list among the players, the 10 of them who I put in the mix in this category. First of all, let's start with Connor Norby. I think he's a great player. I just think he's blocked everywhere. And I do think he's going to start the year in AAA Norfolk, playing almost every day at second base, most likely, playing some left field as well. And I just think he is the most likely to get traded next when the O's need some big league help. Connor Norby is a guy who can help a major league team right now. He's just blocked everywhere in the infield. Like, he's not better than Jackson Holliday or Gunnar Henderson or Jordan Westberg at this point. He's not better than Kobe Mayo. And for what the Orioles need right now, in terms of utility guys, I think Jorge Mateo and Ramon Arias just fit them better than Connor Norby does. So there's just really nowhere to put this guy. For Kobe Mayo, I think he is going to make an impact on the Orioles at some point in 2024. I'm not completely ruling out an opening day for him just because they could use maybe an impact righty bat. But I think they're going to want him to get some more AAA at-bats. They'll play him at third. They'll play him at first, maybe a little bit of right field in Norfolk. And at some point this year, he'll be up, but I think it's just easier to start him in AAA. I loved that the Orioles brought Tyler Nevin back on waivers this offseason. I just love Tyler Nevin. I've always liked his game. It seems like a great person to have in the clubhouse. The guys seem to love Tyler Nevin. He just doesn't really fit on this roster. And maybe, that they were looking for a right-handed infield bat at third base potentially, but it's just, again, if you're going to go that way, Kobe Mayo is just a better option. And I don't think he's jumping him. And there's just so many more talented infielders. And it's nice that Nevin can play left and right field, gives him a little versatility. But, he's been bad in the bigs with the O's. He's been bad in the bigs with the Tigers last year. I just think the Orioles want him here as depth. I think they'll hope they can sneak him through waivers because he is out of options and keep him in AAA as depth. I just don't see him making the opening day roster. For Ryan McKenna, it's possible, especially if Cedric Mullins is not healthy. Now, we got good Cedric Mullins news. He says he'll be back in spring training games next week. He'll be ready for opening day. If Mullins were to somehow be hurt, Ryan McKenna jumps right back into this conversation, but he can't hit. Yeah, the defense is fine. He can play center field. It's just there's so many better options. McKenna is another guy who is out of options, so he would have to go through waivers. I honestly think he wouldn't get claimed. I think he'll pass through waivers and end up as solid depth in Norfolk. Nick Maton was an interesting pickup for the O's, mostly a second baseman, but he can play a little short, a little third, can play left and right field. He's a left-handed bat. He's been in the big leagues with the Phillies and the Tigers. He's just kind of similar to Nevin, where I think the upside is a little higher than Tyler Nevin, and the versatility is better, and the defense is just better across the board. He just doesn't hit for a lot of power. And again, it's like there's better options in that ilk that we'll talk about in the infield. I just don't see him fitting in with this team. And you could argue one of the better options is Colton Wong, who the Orioles brought in, the veteran, on a minor league deal last week. They certainly want him here to compete for an opening day spot. And I think he is in that conversation right now. But after the disaster that was Wong's 2023 season with the Mariners, even after he had come off 2 good years with the Brewers, I'm just not convinced the bat is there. And he certainly has a chance. Like, he is right in the mix to make the opening day roster. He's a big league veteran. He's been around for a long time. I'm just not convinced the bat is there. I think he was brought in to bring more competition and maybe see him out a little bit. I just don't see it for Colton Wong. Kyle Stowers, I get how great the spring has been, and it's been awesome to see it for Kyle Stowers. But I think his 2023 season, no matter it was his fault or the fault of random injuries, getting hit in the face with a pitch is not something that you can control. The just 2023 year for Kyle Stowers just hurt him in so many ways. So many outfielders leapfrogged him when he was actually in the big leagues and healthy. He was unplayable. That's why he got sent down to AAA a month into the year. And he is still could be an impact bat for somebody. It's hard to sneak him onto this roster over some of the other outfielders I'm going to talk about. And that's just why I feel like he's going to start the year in AAA again. And he might be kind of in the similar mold that I talked about Connor Norby, where he can help a major league team right now. He just might be blocked in Baltimore and might have to be part of a trade for that to really happen for him. That leaves us Colton Cowser, Heston Kjerstad, and Jackson Holliday for 2 spots right now. To me, this is an impossible decision. On my last prediction, I took Kjerstad and Holliday as those 2 spots. Spring training stats are not the end-all be-all. It's more about process. It's more about your approach. It's more about the mental side of the game. It's more about the underlying data, well more than what your average is, what your OPS is in spring training. But I will say Cowser has certainly outperformed Kjerstad so far. And when you start to think about, okay, Cedric Mullins getting a little bit of another issue this time in the hamstring. Yes, he seems to be okay, but it's something you got to think about. And you really don't have another center field option on the team. You're trying out Jorge Mateo there. And, you have Austin Hayes who can play center field if you need him to. And although I don't think, and I made it clear on this podcast, I don't think Colton Cowser's defense at this point is good enough for him to be an everyday center fielder. I think he's a really good left or right fielder defensively who can play center field when you need him to, but you don't want to rely on him in center. But if he's on this roster, I think he could still become, at some point this season, the second best defensive center fielder on the team behind, of course, Cedric Mullins. And if they were to need to go to Cowser, he could be a better option. Now, maybe Mateo could be better out there. It certainly could happen. But with what Cowser's done this spring, which has been great, the fact that he's still a really good all-around player, and at the very least, he plays a great defense in the corners, I think you got to give him a deserving nod here. Because I don't know. I mean, it's possible. You could roster both Cowser and Kjerstad, but it would be hard. It feels like it's going to come down to one of them. And maybe because the margins are so razor thin, you go to that spring training performance. And it's been Cowser over Kjerstad. Now, it is hard for me to leave Kjerstad off this roster, right? I'm putting Cowser on there. It's down to Holliday and Kjerstad. It's very different players, very different positions. But if you're down to those two, let's just put Jackson Holliday on this roster and go. Mike Elias says he wants a left-handed hitting second baseman. He's the number 1 prospect in baseball. Yeah, he's only got about 100 AAA at-bats, but let's do it. Let's pull the trigger. And this is incredibly hard for me. I love Heston Kjerstad. What he does at the plate is special, and it pains me to leave him off this opening day roster. But that just shows you how many good hitters the Orioles have on this team and have in big league camp, that it feels okay, at least when you break things down, to send Heston Kjerstad to AAA to begin the year. Give me Cowser, give me Holliday, and let's ride. And Kjerstad will be here. Don't get me wrong. He will be here. It's a tough decision, but I'm taking those 2. So my 13 hitters, my catchers are Rutschman and Can. My infielders, Mountcastle, O'Hearn, Henderson, Arias, Westberg, Mateo, and Holliday. And my outfielders are Hayes, Mullins, Santander, and Cowser, making the team as the hitters. So those are the 13 position players. Next up, the 13 pitchers. Some more open spots in this group and a lot of bullpen options. We'll try to sort them all out coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Factor Meals. Eating better is easy with Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals. Every fresh, never frozen meal is chef-crafted, dietitian approved, and ready to go in just 2 minutes. You'll have over 35 different options to choose from every week, including Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Also, there are more than 60 add-ons to help you stay fueled up and feeling good all day long. So what are you waiting for? Get started today and get after your goals. And I think the best thing is it's so easy. 2-minute meals. You fuel up fast with Factor's restaurant quality meals that are ready to heat and eat whenever and wherever you are. So head to factormeals.com/lockedonmlb50 and use code LOCKEDONMLB50 to get 50% off. That is code LOCKEDONMLB50 at factormeals.com/lockedonmlb50 to get 50% off. So for the third go around this offseason, I am trying my hand at predicting the Orioles 2024 opening day roster. Just ran through the 13 hitters that I think will make the team. Now we move things over to the pitching side. Which 13 arms will go north with the Orioles? And let's start with the starters slash long relief options for the Orioles. I think even with the injuries to Kyle Bradish and to John Means, neither of them will be ready for opening day. We're hoping for Means back by May 1st. Bradish, you just hope he pitches at some point for the Orioles this year and can avoid Tommy John surgery. But I feel like the starting rotation is maybe not set in stone, but we feel fairly good about who the five will be. Corbin Burns, Grayson Rodriguez, Dean Kramer, Cole Irvin, and Tyler Wells. That seems to be your five out there. And then the guys in the mix for long relief or potentially stepping in to be a starter are Bruce Zimmerman, Julio Teheran, and Albert Suarez. Then you go to the bullpen. That leaves 8 bullpen spots with your 5 starters. And I think there are 4 locks out of the 8 spots right now. It's Craig Kimbrell, it's Yennier Cano, it's CNL Perez, and Danny Coulombe. Kimbrell obviously brought in on the 1-year deal to replace Felix Bautista as the closer. Cano was one of the best relievers in baseball last year. And although Perez had a bad start to last year, he was critical down the stretch, and Coulombe was just an amazing pickup for the 2023 Orioles. Those guys are the locks. Then you have 14 pitchers, I would say, in the mix for those final 4 spots in the Orioles bullpen. Let's read them out. Dylan Tate, Mike Baumann, Jacob Webb, Keegan Aiken, Brian Baker, Jonathan Heasley, Matt Crook, Caleb Ort, Nick Vespi, Wanderson Charles, Tucker Davidson, Bruce Zimmerman, Julio Teheran, and Albert Suarez. 14 pitchers for 4 spots. That is the decision-making Mike Elias, Brandon Hyde, and crew have to do basically in the next 2.5 weeks, is knock down 14 arms to 4. It is not going to be easy because I feel like, and to varying degrees, if any of those 14 arms made up the 4 spots, you still have a credible big league bullpen. Now, none of them are like dominant relievers, and that's what makes this harder to make these decisions. But it's depth. It's more depth than the Orioles have had in years. And I said this on Twitter earlier this week. You know, at this point, 3 weeks until opening day over the past few years, I felt like I had a pretty good grasp on what the Orioles opening day roster was. Like there were maybe 1 or 2 spots I felt were up for grabs, but I was like, this is pretty much what it's going to look like. This year, the 2 open spots for the hitters, the 4 for the pitchers, only 20 of 26, I feel, are locks at this point. And those 6 spots, I mean, I talked about it. You've theoretically got 24 players vying for those 6 open spots, and any of the 24 could be put on the team. That's how crazy we are and how much depth there is in this Orioles camp right now. So let's take a look at all those guys, those 14 players I put down for the 4 open spots. Starting with Bruce Zimmerman. It's great that he's still on the 40-man. The Orioles still believe in him somewhat. If he were to make the team, though, it would be as a long reliever. And I think the Orioles just have better long relief options like Suarez, like Teheran, like others. He's just blocked there. He's got options. He will go down, I think, to AAA Norfolk. Jonathan Heasley, another guy who I think at one point was probably in this long relief / starter conversation. Orioles brought him over in a small trade with the Royals earlier this offseason, been a starter and a reliever in Kansas City. But the way he's been used in camp, he's not really being built up as a starter. He's being built up as a reliever in 1-inning stints. It hasn't gone great, although we don't care too much about the spring training results, but I just feel like they're looking at him as more of a short reliever, and he does have options left. There are things that the Orioles want to work on with Heasley's pitch mix. I think they're still working on it, and I think they will do that in AAA and send him down to begin the season. Tucker Davidson, similar kind of thing. The O's brought him in from the Royals to work on things. The splitter that they love just hasn't come around yet. He's also not on the 40-man roster. He was outrighted off of it earlier this offseason. That makes it easier for him to just begin in AAA Norfolk, and I think that's what will happen for the lefty Tucker Davidson. Same with Wanderson Charles, the right-hander who the O's brought back on a minor league deal this offseason. Big-time stuff, upper 90s fastball, devastating kind of cutter-slider hybrid. But again, not on the 40-man. There's still work to be done on the command. Easier to just send him to the back end of the Norfolk bullpen and allow him to work there while they figure things out. Caleb Ort, the right-hander, who was brought in on waivers just a few weeks ago by the O's. I think they like his incorporation of the cutter plus his high-velocity fastball. But I just feel like he's so behind the 8 ball coming into camp, and the stuff isn't dominant enough yet to make the team. He does have a minor league option left, though. He's on the 40-man, and I think his spot could be in jeopardy. But if he stays on the 40-man, you can just option him to Norfolk, and I think that's what they would do. Similar to Matt Crook, who also came in on waivers earlier this season, a left-hander with incredible strikeout numbers in AAA last year, also some concerning walk numbers. It's a devastating sweeper he throws with an interesting sinker changeup mix. I really like Matt Crook. He's also got options. He's on the 40-man. I think Crook is the perfect guy. Send to AAA, keep working. If he stays with the O's, I can almost guarantee he will pitch out of the Orioles bullpen at some point this year. I'm sure of it. I just don't think the O's are ready to commit to Matt Crook by opening day. Then there is Albert Suarez. We were fawning over Albert Suarez this week because he threw 3 scoreless innings in his start against the Phillies on Tuesday with 7 strikeouts. It was remarkable what the right-hander did, who the O's brought in on a minor league deal. Last pitched in the big leagues with the Giants in 2017. He's now 34 years old, and all of a sudden he's throwing 97, was in Japan and was in the KBO in Korea over the past few years. And the Orioles scooped him up. They had him change his pitch mix a bit. They had him work on it in winter ball, and it's all playing out. Now, for Suarez, he's a little behind the 8 ball because he seems to be more of a starting option. And even with the injuries, the O's have their depth there. He could get a long relief spot, but he is here on a minor league deal. And what I think the Orioles would like to do with Suarez is have him start the year in the Tides rotation, right, alongside Justin Armbruster and Cade Povich and Chase McDermott and probably Bruce Zimmerman. You throw in one more arm there, you've most likely got the Norfolk rotation to begin the year. But if they need a starter at any point, I could see them going to Suarez. I just don't see them at this point. I could be proven wrong. He could keep pitching this well. Don't see him in the opening day roster at this point. Brian Baker, if you are a listener, a constant listener, and every day or maybe of this podcast, you know I still believe in Brian Baker. And the Orioles still do, too, enough to have him on the 40-man roster. But we know his 2023 was kind of a disaster after a really good breakout 2022 first season with the Orioles. I love the stuff, right? The fastball is good. The changeup, if he could ever command it, is devastating. He just continues to struggle with that pitch. His delivery has a little bit of issues. It's not super repeatable. I think he gets out of just into a funk a lot. He does have options still. I don't think the Orioles will DFA him first. I think there's other guys like Caleb Ort and Crook and Zimmerman and others they would DFA before they would turn to Brian Baker. Because he has another option year left, I think they will send him down to AAA to begin the year. He's going to help the Orioles at some point this season out of the bullpen. Just there's still things he needs to pull together in AAA. We're really just building the Tides bullpen right here. Like the Norfolk Tides are going to have a good pen this season. I think we're at least learning that. And the last guy that's going to be that yo-yo guy again. I mean, it's one final year of being the yo-yo guy for Nick Vasby. This is his final season where he has minor league options. We know how the last 2 years have gone for Vasby. He's been completely lights out. No one can touch him in AAA. He comes to the big leagues and it's less success, but he's still having success. It's just the fact that he throws 89 and he has options, but he's successful. It's like you don't want to commit to him. You bring him up and down. He's good depth. I think that's going to be his role again this year. They're going to max out his 5 up and downs in 2024. They're going to use him as much as they can here. And then there'll be a big Vasby decision next offseason when he runs out of options. But right now, he's going to be that yo-yo guy. And I think once again, he gets sent down to AAA to begin the year. But I mean, look at that Norfolk Tides pitching staff, right? I mentioned you're going Chase McDermott, Justin Armbruster, Cade Povich, 1, 2, 3 in the rotation. And then you're probably looking at Albert Suarez, Bruce Zimmerman, and, some combination of a couple of other guys. Maybe a Ryan Watson finds his way in there, or a Kyle Brenovich, or somebody at that number 6 spot to get some innings. Seth Johnson probably eventually gets into that 6th spot of that rotation. And then in that bullpen, Tucker Davidson and Heasley and Wanderson Charles and Caleb Ort and Matt Crook and Brian Baker and Nick Vasby, it's going to be another good Norfolk Tides team. I'll tell you that right now. But basically that leaves me 5 pitchers for the final 4 spots. Jacob Webb, Dylan Tate, Mike Baumann, Julio Teheran, and Keegan Aiken. I think Dylan Tate is not at lock status just yet, but he's pretty close. There's still questions about how do the Orioles feel about him after the injury, the elbow and the forearm missing all of last year. But he's been so good, looks so healthy. The stuff has been back in spring training. He does have options, but he's in this bullpen. He's your 5th guy. Your 6th guy for me right now, I think, is Mike Baumann. He is out of options. He had a good first half last year. He really tailed off in the second half, was sent to AAA, didn't make the playoff roster. but the stuff looks better and crisper. And Brandon Hyde has said a lot of good things about Mike Baumann so far this spring. He's out of options, and Baumann's a guy where if he doesn't make the team, he's going to be put on waivers, and no doubt he is going to be claimed by another team. You are going to lose Mike Baumann fully if he doesn't make this opening day roster. I think the margins are close enough at the end of this bullpen where I think Baumann is going to make this team out of the pen. I also think the Orioles may want a long relief guy. They may want some starting depth. Albert Suarez was certainly an option. I don't think they would have gone out and gotten Julio Teheran, although it was just a minor league deal. Remember, they actually outbid the Mets in terms of the signing bonus for Julio Teheran to get him to come to Baltimore on the minor league deal. To me, that means that they like him as a veteran presence enough to have him make the team as either the number 5 starter or the long relief guy. And either way, Teheran, it's been 2 scoreless outings in spring training so far. He looked good with the Brewers last year. I think he's going to make this team as maybe a long guy. I don't know how long he sticks around with the Orioles, but I think they brought him in to at least get him on this opening day roster, and I think he's going to make the team. And really, for me, it's down to 2 guys. It's Keegan Aiken and Jacob Webb for the final spot in the Orioles bullpen. Webb, who came in on waivers in August, was awesome for a month, then kind of faded down the stretch and had a really bad postseason. And then Keegan Aiken, who was not great early last year, then had a back injury, missed the entire second half of the year, but is now healthy and is one of the pitchers that is gaining the most traction, getting the best things said about him so far in Orioles spring training. Seems healthy, seems even better than before. Orioles love his stuff, love that high ride fastball, love that he can throw his breaking balls over the plate a little bit more. Andy Koska had a good piece in the Baltimore Banner this week talking about like all the guys where their stock is up this spring. And Aiken was one of the guys he really highlighted in that piece. But Keegan Aiken has options and Jacob Webb does not, which means if Jacob Webb doesn't make the team, he goes on waivers and somebody probably claims him and you lose him. If Keegan Aiken doesn't make the team, you can just send him to AAA and call him up whenever you need. And in the past, that has made me lean towards Jacob Webb. But the way that Webb hasn't been used a whole lot this spring, the way he ended his time with the O's, the way he's just been bouncing around on waivers anyway. And the O's, if you look at the bullpen right now, it's only the 2 left-handers. It's Cionel Perez and Danny Coulombe. I think they would really like a third left-hander in that bullpen because I think Davidson and Crook and Zimmerman haven't done quite enough yet to get that spot. And of course, it's DL Hall's spot, but they traded him to Milwaukee to get Corbin Burns. I'm going to give Keegan Aiken the final bullpen spot for the Orioles. So my 13 pitchers on the roster, Burns, Grayson Rodriguez, Kramer, Irvin, and Wells in the rotation. And then in the bullpen, you've got Kimbrel, Cano, Perez, Coulombe, Tate, Baumann, Teheran, and Aiken. So there's your 26. So coming up next, we'll finish off the pod. What does the roster really look like with those 26 players? What are the roles? What are the lineups? What's the rotation? What's the bullpen? Get to that to finish off the pod coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug right into your existing TV and provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as live and free TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. And they recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. What's better than that? So if you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on that one. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/lockedonfiretv. So it's Baltimore Orioles 2024 opening day roster prediction 3.0. Gave you my hitters, my 13 hitters to make the team. Rutschman, McCann, Mountcastle, O'Hearn, Henderson, Arias, Westberg, Mateo, Holliday, Hayes, Mullins, Santander, and Cowser. And the 13 pitchers, Burns, Rodriguez, Kramer, Irvin, and Wells. And then you've got Kimbrel, Cano, Perez, Coulombe, Tate, Baumann, Teheran, and Aiken for my 26 players. So what will this team look like? Let's start with the pitching rotation. Corbin Burns is my opening day starter, no doubt about it. Grayson Rodriguez as the 2, Dean Kramer as 3, and then probably Cole Irvin at 4 and Tyler Wells at 5, potentially jumping in and out of that rotation. And I think hopefully if it takes about a month maybe for John Means to come back May 1st, I think he would push Tyler Wells into the bullpen in that spot. Then in your pen, you have Craig Kimbrell as your closer. Doesn't mean he's going to have that job all year, but he was signed to do that. Yennier Cano is going to be your main setup man in high leverage. He was so great last year. You're going to flip between Cionel Perez and Danny Coulombe. They will be your 2 high leverage lefties, but good thing about those guys is especially Coulombe, they can get righties out as well, so you can put them in any kind of high leverage spot. I think it's probably Coulombe before Perez in terms of the trust factor, but the O's definitely trust those guys. And then you hope that Dylan Tate is healthy again. You can put him right back in that like really good 7th inning pitcher role to be a righty-lefty combination between Tate and Cano. And then on the flip side, Coulombe and Perez as your setup guys to make you feel really good. And then you have Mike Baumann and Keegan Aiken as just kind of your middle relievers. One's a righty, one's a lefty. It's a good split that you can kind of mix and match. And Julio Teheran, your long guy. You can use him in different spots if you want to, but if you need a long reliever, you have him there as well. Now, in terms of, okay, John Means comes back, Tyler Wells goes to the bullpen, who gets cut? It's probably either if Julio Teheran is not pitching well, he's expendable, or it's probably someone like a Keegan Aiken who does have an option and would go down to AAA. Then you go to the hitting side. Obviously, Adley Rutschman is your starting catcher. James McCann will give him a break whenever the O's can find it. It'll always be on Sundays, and then maybe one other time during the week as well. Adley will DH some as well. In the infield, Ryan Mountcastle will always play against lefties and against some righties. Ryan O'Hearn will almost always play against righties and probably not against lefties. Gunnar Henderson, he'll get a few off days against left-handers, but will pretty much be in there every day at either shortstop or at third base. Ramon Arias will be kind of your roving utility infield. He'll play at third. He'll play at second. He might even play some first base as well. He's a better hitter against righties. He's a reverse splits guy, but he'll be in there just against different pitchers, get him in and out of the lineup. Jordan Westburg, I think, kind of begins the year as mostly your main third baseman, playing a good amount of second base as well for the Orioles. Probably playing against more lefties, but he's in and out of the lineup as well. We'll kind of move around the diamond. Will Jordan Westburg. And Jorge Mateo will be kind of your super utility. He'll make some starts at shortstop. He'll make some starts in center field, but only against left-handed pitching. I doubt we see him at all in the lineup if a righty is on the mound. But if there is a righty on the mound, that doesn't mean Jorge Mateo is going to sit the bench for 9 innings, because you'll see him as a defensive replacement, or you'll most likely see him as a pinch runner late in these games with the elite speed. And then for Jackson Holliday, it'll be interesting. He's going to play a little shortstop, but he would play mostly second base on this team. I think the Orioles will try to hide him from some left-handed pitching early and then slowly bring him in to be more of an everyday player, but certainly having a role on this team. And then in your outfield, Cedric Mullins is going to be out there almost every day. He'll probably sit against some left-handers, but he's mostly going to be out there every day. And same with Anthony Santander. He'll play some right. He'll play some first base. He'll DH some, but he'll be in the lineup almost every day for the O's. And then Austin Hayes, it'll be most every day early. Might sit against a few right-handers to get a guy like Colton Cowser into the lineup. Again, Cowser will not play against lefties, but against righties, you could see him some in left field, some in right field, maybe a little center field if they need it, but just working him into the lineup as much as they can. And in terms of an opening day lineup for the Orioles, you're most likely going to see Reed Detmers, the left-hander for the Angels, pitch on opening day. So you'll probably see something that looks like Adley Rutschman catching and hitting leadoff. You'll have Ryan Mountcastle at first base hitting second. Anthony Santander in right field would hit third. Gunnar Henderson, we'll say probably playing third base in this spot. He would be hitting fourth. Austin Hayes in left field in the 5 spot for the O's, with Jordan Westburg playing second base against the lefty. I think maybe they sit Jackson Holliday. Jordan Westburg is hitting 6th in that part of the order. Then you start to look around and say, okay, who are we going to play? And this is an episode I did last week. Do the Orioles have too many left-handers in their lineup? You start to think about, okay, who would DH in this spot? Who do we trust? You know you're going to have Jorge Mateo probably playing shortstop and hitting 9th. Most likely, you've got Cedric Mullins hitting 7th and still playing center field, even though it is against a lefty. So you just pick your favorite lefty against left-handed pitching. I think on opening day, the Orioles would probably go with Ryan O'Hearn and hit him 8th against a left-hander, just to be like, this is the guy that was such a big part of our team last year. Let's reward him with an opening day start. Now, it would be weird to have both Holliday and Cowser on the opening day roster and have them on the bench in that game. Yes, it would be odd, but I think the O's would want to hide both of them from left-handed pitchers early in the year. And I think maybe they reward O'Hearn with that spot on opening day. But that's how I think things look. Tell me if I'm wrong. Certainly tell me if I'm wrong in the comments. But that is my Orioles opening day roster prediction 3.0. Don't worry, I'll be doing more of them before opening day. And then one more thing before we go today and this week on the podcast. Remember, thank you all for getting me to over 6,000 subscribers on YouTube. Because we did, doing a giveaway here on the podcast. It is the Jim Palmer statue giveaway from a few years ago at the yard. Giving it away. It's got the box too. It's in the box down here as well. 2 things you got to do to be entered to win the Jim Palmer statue, which luckily does not come with the weird tweets. Number 1 is subscribe to the Locked On Orioles podcast on YouTube. And number 2 is put in the comment section of today's video or of any other video this week. The Orioles had the great Jim Palmer, a Hall of Famer. Then, they had some good pitchers. Then they had Mike Mussina, and he was amazing, another Hall of Famer. Then Mussina in the early 2000s left for the Yankees in free agency, and it's been kind of a whirlwind with starting pitchers for the Orioles. Who has been the Orioles' best starting pitcher since Mike Mussina left? Tell me who you think it is in the comment section. That is how you enter. Entries will end tonight, Friday night, March 8th at midnight. I will draw the winner from all the entries on Saturday, and then make sure to listen to the end of Monday's episode where I will give you the winner of the Jim Palmer statue. Again, subscribe on YouTube, leave in the comments best pitcher since Mussina for the O's, and you could win this Jim Palmer statue. But that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. We will be back on Monday, recapping a little weekend action from the Orioles in spring training, getting you all the news and notes you need from the O's as we get closer and closer to opening day. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.